Lagos, the heartbeat of Nigeria, a city that never truly sleeps. The streets were alive with chaos and purpose, a buzzing blend of honking yellow Danfo buses, impatient drivers shouting, and the rhythmic chants of street vendors selling everything from roasted corn to wristwatches. Beneath the noise, the crowd moved fast, their eyes focused, their hearts hardened by the grind of survival. Few ever stopped. Fewer ever looked down. But there, at the edge of a cracked sidewalk near an old junction in Yaba, sat a man who had long since faded into the background of the city's noise. His name was Daniel, and though people only saw the broken man in a wheelchair, they never noticed the once vibrant soul beneath. Daniel, a 38-year-old Nigerian man, stood tall at 1m90, or rather, had once stood tall, before life pulled his legs from beneath him. His skin was a deep coffee brown, sun-darkened yet striking. His cheekbones were sharp, and his jawline defined, making it obvious that he was once incredibly handsome. But now, he had grown thin, almost skeletal. His arms looked too long for his body, hanging from his frail shoulders as though carrying the weight of years of pain. His once bright eyes were now dull, watching people pass with a mix of numbness and quiet knowing. He sat slumped in an old, rusted manual wheelchair, the rubber wheels cracked and squeaking every time he shifted his weight. His hair was unkempt, a tangled mess of tightly coiled curls, and his clothes were chaotic, mismatched, torn, and layered as though thrown on in desperation. A purple plaid jacket, once fine, now hung off him like a shroud, paired with mud-stained trousers that barely clung to his waist. His shoes were unmatched, one an old loafer, the other a flip-flop with a missing strap. But none of that drew attention. To the rushing crowd, he was just another madman, another street beggar they pretended not to see. Daniel didn't beg loudly like others did. He didn't raise his voice. He simply sat there, eyes lowered, hands resting in his lap. A piece of torn cardboard lay at his feet, with the words scrawled in fading marker. "Please. I'm hungry. God bless you." And though hundreds passed him by daily, not a single soul truly stopped. He had chosen that spot deliberately. It was close to the open market where food smells floated through the air, cruel reminders of what he couldn't afford. But it was also near the offices, the fancy buildings where people in suits and heels walked like they ruled the world. Daniel watched them all, studying their faces, their expressions, searching for something. A flicker of humanity, maybe. Then came the sun. It rose high and hot, casting sweat on every face and burning the back of Daniel's neck. Yet he didn't complain. He had long accepted that suffering was his new rhythm, his new language. And yet, in all this chaos, Daniel's mind wandered. He remembered things, boardrooms, meetings, a villa in Lekki, the sound of his own laughter. But those were distant echoes, and he dared not dwell there long. Pain had taught him to forget. His stomach growled. His lips were cracked. But still, he waited, not just for food, but for something far rarer in this city, kindness. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when she appeared, graceful, poised, and glowing against the gritty backdrop of the Yaba streets. Her presence was so distinct, so unmissable, that even the busiest commuters paused to steal a second glance. Her name was Sonia, and she seemed like she belonged to another world entirely. Sonia, a 22-year-old Nigerian woman, stood tall at 1m90, with an elegant and slender build. Her skin was light and smooth, like rich ivory, untouched by the Lagos sun. Her long black hair was tied neatly in a low bun, exposing the delicate curve of her neck. She wore a clean, white ankle-length dress, tailored to perfection, cinched at the waist with a golden sash. Her feet were adorned with flat leather sandals, and in one hand, she held a small transparent food container. There was nothing flashy about her, yet her natural beauty, grace, and confidence drew attention like a magnet. Every day for the past 3 weeks, Sonia had passed this street on her way back from her internship at a nearby design studio. But unlike everyone else, she saw him. She had noticed him, Daniel, sitting in a broken wheelchair. His uncombed hair, piercing cheekbones, and mismatched clothes made him easy to ignore. But Sonia couldn't ignore him. There was something about him. Something in the way his eyes didn't beg, even though he clearly had nothing. A quiet dignity wrapped in silence. That afternoon, she stopped again. "Good afternoon," sir," Sonia, the light-skinned, elegant young woman in white, said softly, bending slightly so he could see her face clearly. Her voice was gentle, with a softness that contrasted the harshness around them. Daniel, the crippled and sharply featured man in torn purple and brown, slowly lifted his gaze. He blinked, surprised. People rarely spoke to him, not with kindness, and certainly not with respect. "I brought you food," she added, extending the container toward him. He hesitated. Was it a trick? Another moment of pity wrapped in performance? But no, there was no camera, no crowd watching. Just her. Sincere. Calm. Present. "Why?" he asked, his voice gravelly from disuse. "You looked hungry," she said simply. No lectures. No judgment. Just that, a simple act of kindness. Daniel, still stunned, reached out his thin, long-fingered hand and took the food. It was jollof rice with fried plantains and a small bottle of water. "Thank you," he murmured. "What's your name?" "Sonia," she replied with a smile. "And yours?" "Daniel." From that day forward, Sonia, the tall, elegant, light-skinned woman, came every afternoon. She brought him food, sometimes homemade, sometimes purchased. And she always stopped to talk, not for show, but because she cared. To most, it looked odd, a rich-looking young woman in white speaking with a crippled beggar in tattered clothes. But to them, it became a routine. A ritual. A friendship blooming between two souls society had no idea were equals in spirit. Over the next several days, Sonia continued her daily visits to the same street corner. Her white ankle-length dress, cinched at the waist with her signature golden sash, fluttered gently in the dusty Lagos breeze. Each time she came, she brought not just food, but dignity, silence, and the rarest kind of attention, a listening ear. Daniel, the handsome but visibly underweight and deep coffee-colored skin, remained seated in his old, rusted wheelchair. His sharp cheekbones, thin limbs, and disheveled short black hair framed a face that had once carried the confidence of a man who believed in life. Now, that face was slowly softening, like a wall letting in the first rays of sunrise. That afternoon, after accepting his meal and giving his usual quiet thanks, Daniel, the crippled man in his faded purple plaid jacket and tattered brown trousers, looked at her more intently than ever before. "Why do you do this?" he asked, eyes narrowing just slightly. Sonia, the tall, radiant woman in white, smiled but didn't respond immediately. She sat down on the low pavement beside him, not caring that her dress would collect the dust of the street. "Because I was taught that the world is not changed by noise, but by actions," she replied calmly. "And no one deserves to feel invisible." Daniel turned his gaze away, toward the road. "I wasn't always like this," he said, almost as if whispering to himself. "I know," she said softly, surprising him again. "How?" he asked. "Because of your eyes. They hold too many stories to belong to a man who gave up." There was silence for a long moment. Then slowly, Daniel began to speak. "I had a company. I was a software engineer. Built systems for banks, even ran a firm in Abuja," he began, his voice still hoarse but steadier now. "Life was good, until my accident. I was traveling for a client pitch, the car flipped. I woke up in the hospital. No one came. My legs were gone. My business partners vanished. Family? They had their own problems." He looked down at his knees, barely visible beneath the torn fabric of his pants. "This chair," he said, tapping the rusting handle, "became my prison. I couldn't walk, couldn't work, couldn't beg. I just faded." Sonia, the elegant, light-skinned woman with deep eyes, didn't interrupt once. She just watched him, not with pity, but with something far more powerful, belief. "You're still here," she said after he fell silent. He blinked. "That means the story isn't over yet." Daniel let out a dry chuckle. "You're too young to be this wise." "Pain teaches early," she replied, looking away for a moment. "My father died when I was 10. Mima raised me selling clothes under the bridge. I learned that broken people can still be beautiful." A car horn blared in the distance, jarring them both slightly back into reality. She rose gracefully, dusted off her dress, and handed him another small parcel, a wrapped book. "What's this?" he asked. A journal, she said. Write your thoughts. Or your plans. Or your dreams. Even if it's just one sentence a day. Daniel, the thin, handsome man with intense eyes and coffee-dark skin, looked at the journal like it was made of gold. Thank you, he said, voice trembling. I'll see you tomorrow, Sonia, the 1m90 tall woman in white with glowing light skin, said as she turned and walked away into the crowd. And for the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel like a shadow in the city. The following week brought a quiet transformation. Each day, Daniel waited with more alertness in his rusted wheelchair. He had begun writing in the journal that Sonia had given him. She had not only given him food, she had offered him reflection. The cracked pavement beneath his wheels no longer felt like a cell, but like a balcony from which he could observe the city and perhaps one day re-enter it. On this particular afternoon, Sonia, wearing a fitted sky blue blouse tucked into a flowing white skirt, approached with her usual grace, her light skin glowing under the golden Nigerian sun. She carried a bag that seemed fuller than usual. Good afternoon, Daniel, she greeted with her melodic voice, her smile as bright as ever. Afternoon, Daniel, still thin and seated in his squeaky old wheelchair, replied with a subtle nod, his voice stronger than in days past. I brought something new today, Sonia said as she sat beside him on a small folded stool. She pulled out a portable radio and a notebook full of diagrams. Daniel raised an eyebrow. A radio? And a plan, she said, her eyes dancing. You once said you were a software engineer. I thought maybe you'd enjoy hearing tech news again. The notebook, well, it's just sketches. Ideas. I don't know if they're good. She opened the book and turned it toward him. Inside were sketched outlines of a mobile app, handwritten notes, and sample code. Sloppy, yes, but intentional. A long pause stretched between them. Did you draw these? Daniel, the coffee-skinned man in rags, asked with a mixture of surprise and disbelief. Yes, she replied simply. I've been watching tutorials online. I thought, maybe one day, you and I could build something together. Daniel couldn't respond immediately. He stared at the notebook, and then back at her, this young woman with light skin and a heart stronger than steel. I don't even have a laptop, he whispered. You will, she answered. He chuckled, a real, almost joyful sound. You're insane, Sonia. Maybe, she laughed with him. But you said something a few days ago, that you weren't always like this. And I can't stop thinking, maybe, just maybe, you're not meant to stay like this either. Daniel, still dressed in his faded purple plaid jacket and tattered brown trousers, looked down at his journal resting on his lap. I wrote something today, he said, slowly opening it. Do you want to hear it? Always. He cleared his throat. Day 7. The sun feels warmer. The air smells sharper. Maybe it's not the world that's changing, maybe I am. I want to walk again. Not with legs, but with purpose. She was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of the words. You're walking already, she whispered. Just then, a little boy passed by and dropped a coin into Daniel's cup without being asked. The boy looked at him with curiosity, not fear, like he was a man worth noticing. For the first time in years, Daniel, the crippled but dignified man with glowing eyes and a hopeful spirit, smiled genuinely, not because he received something, but because he had become someone again. It had been 3 days since Sonia last saw Daniel. She was starting to worry. She had returned to the usual corner, her steps quick and heels echoing along the concrete, but the rusted wheelchair was empty. No notes. No clues. Her mind buzzed with possibilities. Had someone taken him? Had he given up? But just as her thoughts spiraled, her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She answered. Hello. A deep but warm voice replied. It's me. Daniel. Her breath caught. She recognized it instantly. Daniel? Are you okay? Where are you? A short pause. Can we meet at your house? He asked. I have something to show you. That evening, as dusk painted Lagos in golden hues, Sonia stood at the front of her modest compound home in Surulere, adjusting the ribbon around her waist. She had barely slept, anticipation buzzing under her skin. Then she heard it, the purr of an engine. A luxury black SUV, polished to a mirror shine, turned the corner and rolled toward her gate. The vehicle, sleek and regal, was unlike anything she had seen in her neighborhood. The car stopped. Her heart thudded. The driver's door opened. And from it stepped Daniel, the 38-year-old tall Nigerian man, now radiant, still 1m90 but healthier, his coffee-brown skin glowing, and his short black hair freshly trimmed. He wore a tailored navy suit, crisp and spotless, and walked on his own. No wheelchair. No rags. Just a man transformed. Sonia gasped, her hands covering her mouth. "Daniel?" she whispered. "Yes," he replied, walking slowly toward her. "It's me." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't understand, how?" He stopped in front of her, his eyes soft. "I wanted to be sure, Sonia. I needed to know if there were still people like you in this world. People who saw worth beyond money, beyond status, beyond the surface." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a gold envelope. "I'm not a beggar," he said gently. "I'm Daniel Obasi, CEO of Obasitech Holdings. I own 3 companies in Lagos, 2 abroad. I've been searching for someone genuine, someone I could trust not just with business, but with heart." Sonia was speechless. "You fed me when I was invisible to the world. You talked to me like a man. You listened. You made me believe again." She stepped back slightly, her emotions caught between awe and confusion. "But why the disguise?" "To learn," he said simply. "To test. I was tired of opportunists and gold diggers. And now I've found someone priceless." He extended the envelope. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a deed to a fully furnished apartment in Lekki and a business grant worth 15 million Nigerian nairas. "I want to invest in you the way you invested in me." Sonia began to cry, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never did it for money," she whispered. "I know," Daniel, the now handsome, healthy billionaire with a sincere smile, said. "That's exactly why you deserve everything." He took her hand gently. And this is only the beginning. The next morning, the Lagos sun rose with a golden promise. The city buzzed, as it always did, with the rhythmic sounds of life, hawkers calling, cars honking, radios playing Afrobeat on every corner. But for Sonia, it felt like she had awakened in a dream. She stood by the window of her new apartment in Lekki, a bright, modern space with cream-colored curtains swaying gently in the breeze. The sunlight kissed her skin as she watched the palm trees swaying below. She still couldn't believe it. Just yesterday, she was returning from the market with leftover food for a man she thought was a crippled beggar. Now she lived in one of the most prestigious areas in Lagos. Her life had changed overnight. A knock at the door stirred her thoughts. She opened it. There stood Daniel, in a flawless navy blue suit paired with brown leather shoes. In his hand was a bouquet of sunflowers. "For you," he said, his smile lighting up the doorway. Sonia, still wearing her elegant white blouse and sky blue skirt, took the flowers and chuckled. "I'm not used to this version of you." He laughed. "I'm still the same man. Just, without the wheelchair." They sat on the balcony, sipping mango juice, the morning breeze dancing around them. "I want you to come to the foundation launch with me today," Daniel said suddenly. "Foundation?" she asked. He nodded. "The Obasi Foundation. We're launching a food bank and medical support center for the homeless, the crippled, the forgotten. I started planning it years ago, but I never had the right heart behind it. Now I do. You inspired it." Sonia's eyes glistened. "I was just doing what my mother taught me," she said. "She always told me, compassion is the only real wealth we can give." "She was right," he replied. "And that's why I want you not only as a guest today, but as a partner." She froze. "A partner?" "In the foundation. In life," he added slowly. She stared at him. He pulled out a small velvet box from his blazer. It wasn't a ring. Inside was a golden pendant, a sunflower, just like the one she gave him when he was still in the wheelchair. "It's not a proposal." "Not yet," he said. "But it's a beginning." She smiled through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "To all of it." Later that day, Sonia, the beautiful tall Nigerian woman with light skin and black ponytail, stood on a grand stage next to Daniel, the handsome in a navy blue suit, as they cut the ribbon to open the Obasi Foundation Center in Lagos. Camera flashes sparkled like stars. People clapped. Children laughed. The same beggars and forgotten souls she had once walked past now smiled with hope. Daniel held the microphone and said, "I once sat in a wheelchair, ignored, mocked, starving. And one woman changed my life, not by money, but with kindness. She reminded me that dignity is not in wealth, but in how we treat others." He turned toward Sonia, his eyes soft. "Let this foundation stand not as a monument to money, but to the miracle of compassion." The crowd roared in applause. And in that moment, under the Nigerian sun, two souls who had met on the roadside began something far greater than either had imagined, not just a love story, but a legacy. In a world where appearances deceive and wealth hides in rags, true beauty lies in the kindness we offer when no one is watching. Sonia didn't know that her simple act of compassion toward a man in a wheelchair would change her destiny forever. And Daniel, once hidden beneath worn-out clothes and a wheelchair, discovered that true love cannot be bought. It must be earned through character and sincerity. This story reminds us all, give without expecting. Love without judging. And always look beyond the surface, because miracles often wear simple clothes. Sparkles, if this story touched your heart, share it to inspire others. Be the reason someone believes in goodness again. #today, find one person in need, and give. Not money, but dignity. A kind word. A smile. A small gesture. You never know, that act might change everything. Thank you for watching.